Good evening, everyone. I have just started a few minutes early. I could see lots of people were in the waiting room, but we won't begin until 4 o'clock. So you've got time to go to the loo or get a cup of tea or whatever you need. And I will start on the dot at 4 o'clock. Thanks. Hi everyone. Okay, so let's get started. I'm Chloe, first of all, and I'm one of the education consultants at Picture News. So I write a lot of the resources and then run training sessions with staff and with students too. So that keeps me very, very busy. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me this evening because I know things are manic at this time of year. So um, I'll try and keep it brief and share lots of helpful and interesting things. Equally, as much as I have to share, I'm hoping that if you have any ideas, especially if there's anything that you think I haven't covered, or if there's something specific that you're doing at school that you think is supporting the children's understanding of the British values or other areas, then please do feel free to share that. Hopefully this is a really great opportunity for everyone to share practice from all over. And thanks for lots of hellos in the chat window. Hello to everybody. And we do have people from all over. So Louise Harper from St Rose's Special School in Stroud, Susan at Adele Primary. We've got Farah she's in Teesside, Andy at Chadsmead Primary in Lichfield. Oh, loads of people. Cumbria. Oh, got East Riding of Yorkshire. I'm in North Yorkshire, so not far away. Surbiton, Southport, the Wirral, Milton Keynes. So yeah, thank you so much. And please do continue to use the chat window again for anything that you think is helpful, or if you've got questions on anything that I've said, feel free to pop that there. We've also got the Q&A function on. Or you can always email me as well. We've got the help email at the bottom, and things can get forwarded along. If you have any questions for me, that's absolutely fine. So we're here tonight to talk about the British values and kind of exploring those through current affairs. So we're going to talk about and hopefully gain a greater understanding of what those values are, as well as the requirements for Ofsted. I'm going to share loads of ideas of how to help children to understand and kind of live those British values at school and through using the news. And then I've just got some kind of practical ideas from us and some ideas that I've taken from other schools along the way. So hopefully they'll be useful for you and some things you might want to implement yourselves. So let's get started then. I'd like you to pop into the chat window anything that you think is relevant to the British values that you're doing at the moment. So how do you currently promote them in school? What does that look like? How's your knowledge? What do you already know? How do you think your students' knowledge is? So feel free, have a chat to the people that you're with if you're in staff meeting or whatever, and then pop any ideas that you have into the chat. That would be great. Scott, yeah, as it's a webinar, you won't be able to speak, so there's no mic access, but you can type into the chat window. So I hope that's okay. Wow, okay, so loads of great ideas in here. Rachel Johnson says, part of our Monday whole school assemblies. Charlotte Turton says, using picture news and the school council. Mel Barraclough says, assemblies and smart school council meetings. Oh, I like the sound of those. Danielle also says school council. Dara says, we have a weekly display that's updated and children contribute using post-its. I love that idea. I feel like I've seen pictures of that and it's great. Stephanie Fox says we have a school council that help make decisions. Yeah, that's great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Michelle says assemblies, PSHE, enrichment curriculum. Megan Hill says, whole school assemblies. We're currently exploring democracy via school council elections. Yeah, there's so many examples of where the values are, happening all around the children at school. And we'll pick some of these out later. Thanks for that. Um, oh, my chat's really buzzing around. Laura White says PSHE and assemblies. N Rose says picture news lessons and displays. Jag Sandhu says British values linked to PSHE scheme of work. Oh, that's really helpful. Shared an assembly, use picture news as an assembly, which will focus on the different British values. That's great. Something Village says we refer to them as life values rather than British values and have a list of them next to each interactive board and link them to the learning. That's great. Oh, I'll be interested to know if they are exactly the same as the British values or if you've made any changes to those. Bryony says whole school assemblies, we've got displays, curriculum audits, key stage assemblies, school councils, house captains. Awesome. Oh, P4C, yeah, that's a really good one. So it sounds like you're doing a lot already. That's great. The chat will come. I'm going to send the recording and the slides after the session. So if you feel like you've heard some ideas that you want to revisit, you'll be able to access the chat window and have a little look through there. Or you can even look through now. You can just make sure that your chat messages are visible to everyone. Super. Thanks for that. That's really great. So a bit of background then to begin with about the British values. So they originally came into being as part of the Prevent strategy. So this was back in 2011. And since then, Prevent's kind of died off a little bit, but the British values have really remained a priority for the government. And schools are required to respect these values, and the government really wants to see that schools have a really clear strategy for how they are embedding these values at school and really supporting the children's understanding and kind of identification of those values and what they mean. So I'm going to play a video now of a gentleman, this man. He's in Covent Garden and he's kind of had a bit of a spiel about the British values and, you know, what are they and what do they mean? And he goes into Covent Garden and he asks members of the public to name the British values. And he asks them, can you name the 4 British values? And let's see how they do. I'm sharing my sound and the volume's right up, so the volume should be okay. Just make sure you've got yours turned up.
If you could define British values in 4 words.
You gotta help me here.
British values.
British values? Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Flipping heck, I don't know. Oh, I can't.
Come on. 4 words. British values.
I don't really know, that's a tough one. British values. I haven't got a clue.
You haven't got a clue?
I haven't got a clue, sorry.
Could you describe British values in 4 words?
No.
Please? Come on, 4 words. British values.
British values? I don't know, you've caught me on the hop.
Oh, bloody hell.
I ain't got a clue.
Oh my god.
So you get the picture from that small snippet. People are really kind of flustered and bewildered about what he's asking them. And we don't want our children to respond in this way. We want them to have had that really consistent learning and understanding that these British values are not just something that they learn at school, that they actually apply in life beyond that and can help them in life beyond school. So we have split the values into 4. I think lots of, or sometimes you hear people talk about 5 values, but we've combined mutual respect and tolerance just because we feel like they go really nicely together. So we've got individual liberty. This is all about making choices and having the freedom to make choices that might be different to the people around us. Rule of law, self-explanatory, really, rules and laws and why they exist. Democracy, obviously all about having our voices heard, opportunities to vote, making decisions together. And then finally, mutual respect and tolerance. So embracing difference and living side by side with people, no matter who they are, where they're from, and things like that. My colleague Jo came up with this really lovely phrase, I really do matter, as a way of hopefully helping children to remember each of the values because they are quite wordy. But with this phrase, I really do matter, each of those initial letters gives them a bit of a clue as to the 4 British values. So obviously the I standing for individual liberty, the R for rule of law, the D for democracy, and the M for mutual respect and tolerance. So I want to go on to dig a little deeper into each of the values and perhaps how these can be applied to daily things that are going on at school. So we'll start with individual liberty, this idea that we all have the freedom to make our own choices and we show kindness to everyone. So at school, this can look like children just having loads of opportunities to make choices and being supported in whatever their choices might be. And knowing that their choice might be different to somebody else's, but that's okay. And that can be little things like, picking lunch or, picking clothes for non-uniform day. You can highlight those things and remind children they have the freedom to express themselves and to have their own ideas and make their own choices. Um, Giving children the confidence to challenge others. So this idea that it's okay to question other people as long as you're being respectful about it and it's coming from a place of curiosity, that's fine. And that's how we get to know people on a deeper level, finding out about their likes and dislikes and kind of what drives them to do different things and make the choices that they do. And that goes for children and adults. And we can model those kinds of conversations and how to do it in a really respectful way. You can also use real life situations. So I really like talking about individual liberty with children because it sounds really simple, but it's actually got another layer to it. And I think the quote on the right-hand side describes it really nicely. So it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. It means you're free to do what's right. And so, you can choose your clothes for non-uniform day, and that doesn't really have an impact on anybody else. But there might be other choices that the children make, like being physical or using certain language or treating people in a certain way. We can outline to children that that's going to have an impact on somebody else, and what do they want their impact to be? Do they want to make other people feel good and valued and welcome? Or do they want to make other people feel, rubbish and sad and left out? And so a good time to talk about this can be if there are disputes or falling outs, or in maybe a moment of anger or upset, someone lashes out in some way. Once things are calmed down, you can revisit that and have that conversation, that yes, they acted and they chose their actions, and then that's fine. But just this idea that actions have consequences, and we really want to be getting along nicely with the people around us. And that goes for being at school. We really want a happy and harmonious school community, but equally in society at large, they'll have neighbours and co-workers and a group of friends. And conflict isn't always, well, it's not pleasant. And so if we can be mindful and considerate of the things that we do and how they impact others, and that can really help us in those social situations. I should have said before as well that I think the main idea behind these four values is that they allow for freedom of expression and freedom of speech and for people to have their say, while also being considerate and tolerant of other people. And I think the four values really work nicely together as maybe guidelines of how we can achieve that kind of harmony. And it's definitely visible in individual liberty. You can also link it to more creative risks. So whether it's an art lesson or maybe a creative writing lesson, pointing out to children, especially perhaps once the work is finished and that work looks all different, it's because everybody made different choices. And again, you can question those and find out, oh, why did you use this material or this color, or why did you pick that kind of writing style or that specific word or bit of vocabulary? These are all really, really interesting conversations that can be linked really neatly to individual liberty. A couple of people in the chat have said, will we receive the slides? Yes, I'll send them after this session or possibly in the morning, and I'll send a copy of the recording too, so you can come back and revisit any of it. Okay, so next is rule of law. I find that children get to grips with this one really quickly. It's one of those really tangible values. So rules and laws help to keep us safe, and we're all responsible for upholding them. So ways to really kind of embed this at school is as simple as just talking about your own classroom or your school rules, getting the children involved in understanding those and understanding why they are there. And I think lots of children can tell you, or generally, these rules like no running inside or hands to yourself or whatever, they're there to make sure that everybody is happy and safe. And I really like this idea that it's all of the children's responsibility to uphold those. You can talk about also when rules have been broken, going back to individual liberty, sometimes we might make silly choices, and that's what school is all about and what growing up is all about, that we'll make mistakes. But moving on from that, how do you make it right? And how do you try and figure out a way so that that doesn't happen again? Talking about consequences of rules, because obviously that applies in the real world just as much as it does at school. And a really lovely way of bringing this value to life would be having a visitor in. So if you can reach out to your local police station, or perhaps you've got a magistrate or someone else involved in the legal system, often they're really, really happy to come in. And when I talk to children about British values and what they do to learn about them, probably the number one thing that they seem to remember is visitors. So if that can be organised, then that's really, really valuable for the children. So next up is democracy, and I know already in the chat lots of you were saying about you've been voting for school council members, and that's democracy in action. And so just pointing that out, the children can then make the connection between something that's happening at school that they might just see as part of the school way and the school routine. And actually, it's something that all of us do. And in July, and only earlier this month, there's been huge voting going on around the world. So it's kind of exciting that children get to be a part of that in school. So the idea of a democracy is that everybody's opinions are valued. And in order for ours to be heard and listened to, we've also got to listen to the opinions of others, and we make decisions together. So that can be voting for class rewards, voting for your school council, or maybe sports crew members. If you're on the school council, it's kind of understanding that democratic responsibility. You're in that position where, or the children are in that position where they need to listen to their peers and try and gather their voices so that they can then share those in those school council meetings. So it is a really, it's a position of power, and it's a responsibility to be voted into those seats. Voting for other children to receive value certificates, even answering questionnaires. These are all ways that the children can have their say and have their voice heard. And again, just this idea that yes, their voice matters, but the voice of others also matters. And so it's a bit of give and take as to having your say and then listening to others. I think it's a really interesting discussion to have with children about with voting. Majority wins. What about the other people? What do they get? Is that fair? That can be a really interesting discussion to have with the children. Raja says, we have a people who help us unit, and this is always successful, and we invite individuals from the community. It definitely helps to reinforce the learning. The local PCSOs are great. Yeah, absolutely. All of the feedback I get from people in the police forces, that they're so happy to go into school. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, definitely reach out. The children will love it. So if you are voting, it can be a simple hands up, but you can also get children really excited about joining in, if it's a stand up if you think this, or stand on one foot, or even do a silent dance if you agree with this opinion, or whatever it is. I think those really physical ways of voting also have this other benefit, that children get a really good snapshot of children voting for different things, and they can really clearly see if there's a majority. Is it a big majority? Is that most of the children that agree, and only a small number don't? And can you question and find out why people voted in those ways? Or is it split 50-50, and why do the children think that is? So much talk can come from doing voting in this way. But you can also use post-it notes, or mini whiteboards can be a really nice visual way, especially for you sitting at the front. That can be, photographed and popped up somewhere, or using voting jars or boxes. If they're voting for their story at the end of the day, having those books and putting multi-link in, or writing their name for the book, or writing a mark, or whatever it might be, getting children involved in that democratic process, and explaining to them that, that's what they're doing. And now it might just be picking a book or picking a school dinner. But in the future, it could be so much more than that. It can be, picking leaders of the country, and loads of other things. Thanks. Is that, we've had individual liberty, rule of law, democracy, mutual respect and tolerance, is the last one I'm going to talk about. So this is all about respecting, being open to learning from each other's differences. And I guess the most basic way of putting that is, we treat others the way that we want to be treated. And I think this one is probably a value that is talked about all the time, in terms of kindness and respect, and including others. And again, it's then just a small conversation to say, oh, that reminds me of one of our British values. Which value are we thinking about when we're saying, we use kind words, or include everybody, make sure that everybody is feeling valued. So there's loads of opportunities to discuss this, and celebrate the children's differences. There's subjects that lend itself really well, so things like RE, and learning about different religions and beliefs. PSHE, again, thinking about how we treat others and how that makes them feel. News stories, as I was saying before, or maybe that was on another chat. News stories can be a really great window into the wider world for children to see lots of different people and different cultures, and can encourage lots of questioning from the children. And I most recently was teaching in North Yorkshire, in like a little village school, and our children weren't particularly diverse. And also, I think they were kind of nervous to ask questions because they didn't want to say the wrong thing. But we always started our sessions with there's this really lovely poem called A Brave Space. It's kind of this idea that similar to safe space, but the fact that sometimes you do have to be brave to ask those questions. And as long as it's coming from a place of curiosity and kindness, then it's fine to ask questions. And that's how we learn. And I found in my little village school, that's how I could correct misconceptions. And it's how the children got that understanding of why certain traditions exist. Or why people believe in this, that, or the other. So really encourage the children to feel like that they can ask those questions, because that's how they're going to learn from difference, and develop that mutual respect and tolerance. And we can be the greatest models of that. So whether that's with other staff members, or with children, giving them that vocabulary and talking about different people and cultures and beliefs with curiosity and with that awe and wonder, and then that should sort of diffuse into your children. So, beyond Ofsted, kind of interested in learning about how schools support British values. I just think they're so beneficial for children's development generally. So it can really develop them as thinkers, helps them to be really reflective when they're considering, choices that they've made or things that they might want to advocate for or stand up for. It prepares children for life in the outside world, as we've mentioned already, really promotes social skills and tolerance. It can sort of build little people that are going to make a positive contribution to society. If we're really encouraging children to have their voice heard and to consider their opinions and to share that and feel like they've got something to contribute, that can only be a really good thing for the future. It can have a really good impact on behaviour. I had a call with a school not that long ago who um, had said that they behavior was kind of high on their priority list, and that they noticed that actually children were beginning to use some of this values language when they were talking about things that had happened or why they were trying to, act in a certain way or make better choices. And I wonder if the children like that these aren't just that what they might see as arbitrary school rules, they are, part of life as adults too. And so perhaps the values have that sort of clout with children. So that can be a really nice byproduct of talking and learning about British values. And it's great for the social, moral, and spiritual and cultural development of all of our pupils. So how can the news then help us to learn about British values? I sort of like to see the stories as kind of a real life example of British values at play. I think just kind of talking about them can be a bit airy-fairy and maybe a bit abstract for a lot of the children. Whereas if you're unpicking a news story, whether it's using the picture news resources or perhaps you've been watching News Round, you can link the values to those stories, and children can really identify when they see values at play or perhaps an absence of those values if someone is being treated unfairly or things like that. The beauty of the news is that it covers such a broad range of topics. And some of them children might be familiar with, like animals or the environment or sport, but it can also introduce them to more mature themes like political issues or, social disagreements or issues that are ongoing or, ethical and moral dilemmas. So especially, accessing things like News Round or using picture news, it's tailored for children at the primary age range, but it just makes these themes really accessible, and I think that's really, really exciting for children. Oh, sorry, I keep nosing in at the chat. Andy says, police cadets course run. Oh, so that's 6 2-hour sessions in the year six summer. That sounds great. And Farhat says, we've had local councillors for an assembly. It's great. So yeah, loads of really good examples. Thank you. So one for you then. I'm wondering how much the news features in your teaching or in your daily routine currently. So do you use current affairs at the moment? Or perhaps you have an assembly on them? And do you think it's important to cover the news within primary schools? So I'll let you have a think, or again, if you're in a group, just a couple of minutes to think about those questions. And please do share any of your ideas in the chat. Okay, so Stephanie says we watch News Round every morning. Shabab Khan, Picture News is a fantastic way for us to incorporate the news into our weekly lessons. Oh, that's great. It allows teachers to bring the British values to life and into context for the children, which is really important in terms of engaging them for learning. Great. Yeah, I totally agree with the context. I think the kids find it really helpful. Thanks for that. Holly, news round at the end of the day, followed by some discussion. Yep, N Row says daily news round, BBC news round during snack time. Yeah, it's so digestible for the children, and they've got loads of different sections. So I know they have the daily video, but they've also got kind of like fun news or like weird news that's happened that week. So there's loads of stuff to access there. Sharon says, will mention if relevant. So when talking about school rules and school elections, etc., usually talk through weekly Picture News assembly. Dara, oh great, we use Picture News on a weekly basis from reception to year 6. It allows us to approach current topics in a child-friendly way. I think that can be the biggest barrier sometimes, getting those child-friendly sources, which again is why Newsround is so great. And if anyone has any other websites that they're using, then feel free to share in the chat window. Raja says, we feel it's important to enable the children to hear and see different information. Sam at Gorsewood, we have a values focus each month and linked assemblies. Class collective worship occurs weekly using Picture News, a Dizzy World News too. Yeah, Dizzy are great. Salient events in the annual calendar and charity events, Remembrance Day. Yeah, they're great opportunities to, access things from the news, those kind of annual days that come around. Alan says daily news round before lessons. I wonder, Alan, if they then, if the children then kind of go back to the news at all. Maybe does it come back to them later in the day? Thank you. Sharon, you like the idea of values focus each month. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Sharon Roberts, we use Picture News in our Learning for Life lessons. Oh, I love that phrase, learning for life. That's fabulous. Thanks for sharing all of those. So some of our reasons that we are so passionate about getting the news into classrooms and teaching children about the news and from the news is, first of all, the current nature of news means it's things that are happening right now. So if children are made to, or they're kind of captured by a story, or they feel really passionate about a certain issue that they've learned about, they can take action in aid of that issue. And it's completely relevant because it's something that's happening right now. The news can link to so many different areas of the curriculum, and it's always new and exciting stories. So lots of learning objectives can be met, but with brand new material for the children to explore. So that's really exciting and hopefully really engaging for children. And lastly, and probably my favorite of our reasons is it provides that window for children to explore the world around them, not just locally and nationally, but around the world. And we do live in such a global world today with social media. Children have access to content from everywhere, and so if we can be one step ahead, and really engaging children and teaching children about the world around them, and kind of getting ahead of any misinformation or stereotypes and things. I think that's really, really valuable. Super. Somebody says another great resource is the Happy Newspaper. Yeah, because I think often when I talk to children, they say the news can be very like negative and sad and boring. So that's a great one. Andy, there's a question for you. Hopefully, if you're looking in the chat window, how to get involved with the police cadets course. Rowan says we have first news delivered to all Key Stage 2 classes. That's fab. And then Alan says it's discussed Sorry, this was my question. News round discussed in the assembly and then recovered in lessons. Yeah, great. Because another thing that I often hear from teachers is that they might talk about a news story and then kind of later on in the day, children might come back with a question. So it's almost like it kind of stays in their mind for a little bit, or they're processing, or something like that. So that's really interesting. Thank you for letting me know. So this is an example of a poster that about a story that we recently covered, and we are picture news, so we tend to teach about the news through a central image. And so this can be used whether you use the picture news resources, or if you found another story that the children are really interested, get an image that is going to grip them. And this can be a really great starting point for the children to get into that story. It's really engaging and accessible for all of the children. And you can unpick these images with really simple questioning, for younger children, or children with maybe additional needs, just asking them to point things out, or asking them what they can see, or if is there something that they like or dislike, to then going on to, can children make predictions about what they think could be happening? Can they write questions to find out more about this image? And I find that once the children have had chance to talk about an image related to that news story, it kind of draws out any experiences they have that might be linked, or any ideas, and it provides a really nice foundation for then going on to discuss and learn about the story in more detail. And a key question that we ask is, how do you feel looking at that picture or learning about that news story? And for young children, it might just be identifying and naming feelings, and that's brilliant. Getting that emotional literacy from a young age is really important and valuable for children. Again, not only at school but beyond. And then as the children get older, and their vocabulary is improving and expanding all the time, can they pick a word from one of these lists? Have they heard all of these words before? Is there one that they particularly feel? And thinking about, the small nuances between words that have such similar meanings. Our English language is very special in that there are so many words for one feeling. And talking about feelings has so many benefits. First of all, developing emotional literacy. Second of all, if they're sharing feelings with their friends, that's going to help them to develop empathy, especially if they find out that people are maybe responding slightly differently to they are. It gives them that understanding that not everyone's going to feel the same way. Maybe something that has really shocked them has made someone else angry. And talking about that really helps to develop empathy, and that's obviously a really key skill. And lastly, if children are getting, emotionally involved in these stories, maybe they're really excited, maybe they're worried, maybe they're really cross about something, it can inspire action. And that's a really kind of key element of British values, is we act. We don't stand by and let things happen. We don't sit quietly and keep our ideas to ourselves. We're encouraged to share what we think and what we feel. And this can be a really nice exercise in getting the children more confident in sharing that, and being confident in what they're saying and how they're feeling. Oh, that's great. Um, so empathy and then I guess reflection are really the sort of first steps, I think, to children then really understanding what discrimination means, and particularly that value of mutual respect and tolerance. And that's touching on, we don't treat people differently because of certain characteristics. And then you can bring in conversations, around the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, or we can talk about protected characteristics. So really engaging children with looking at difference and embracing and welcoming difference can help them to understand what discrimination means, and can help them again, to be active and to stand up against things that they think are wrong, including discrimination. So each week then we'll link that main news story to one of the British values, and we make a link to a UN right and a protected characteristic too. When we're writing the resources, we always have discussions around which British value we're going to choose. And I think definitely some weeks there's not kind of one that stands out, and we have to have these conversations. And they're conversations that you can have in your classes too. So whether you have got the Picture News resources, you could keep that British value hidden. Can the children, guess or make an educated guess as to what they think the linked value is that week, or if you've revealed it, do they agree, or can they make an argument for any of the other British values linking to this story? So here we linked it to individual liberty. So the idea that this is Jasmine Paris, and she ran this ultra marathon which takes place in Tennessee every year. It's called the Barkley Marathons, and she ran 100 miles, and there's a cutoff of 60 hours, and I think she did it in like half a minute less than the 60 hours. So it was a really amazing story and really inspiring. And we linked it to this idea that, everyone has the right to choose the things that interest them. But there's no reason that you couldn't link it to any of the other values. Whether there are rules for entry, so could link to rule of law. She's the first woman to ever complete this challenge. So thinking about mutual respect and tolerance in terms of difference there. So it can be a really great exercise to see if the children can apply what they know and understand about the British values to a story. And it can also highlight if maybe there are some that they're not sure about, or if they got crossed wires with any of them. And you can go in and correct those, and work on any that you think they need extra practice with. So the news is fabulous for sparking debates. And I mean, this conversation could be a debate in itself, whether you could hand out a different British value to individual groups, and then they have to make an argument for that value linking to the story. But lots of other ways as well. Children are going to have all their own, experiences and values coming into having these discussions. And I think what's great about talking about the news and debating in this kind of area is there's not always sort of a black and white easy answer or easy opinion to have, or there might be an easy opinion, but the children should feel like they can share their ideas, and they can be different to other people's, and that is absolutely fine, and that we all have slightly differing opinions, and they're affected by so many things that are really personal to ourselves. I like this blue column, so hopefully this sheet is useful for sentence starters, for having debates and kind of setting that tone of it is fine to disagree with people, but just to do it respectfully. And there's some kind of openers there that might help the children to, respectfully disagree with others. As we've talked about with some of the values, like with democracy, in order to have our voice heard, there needs to be space for that. So it's everyone's responsibility to spend some time listening, and some time talking. And I really like this question of, has your opinion changed? And it's fine for opinions to change. Even as an adult, my opinions are evolving all the time. And so it's great to have those conversations with children and to help them, feel empowered and really own their ideas, but equally listen to those of others and think about how they might change, or how they might feel differently. So again, here's another example of a really fab poster. I really like this one. There's so much going on. Again, unpicking it with those questions. What can the children see? Can they make a prediction? Have they ever seen, these instruments before? What are the children wearing? Having that safe or that brave space for children to ask those questions and be curious and find out more about what's going on in the world. As we were saying before, once the children have really explored a story and they're feeling really passionate and excited about it, they may and hopefully they will feel inspired to take action. So there's some examples here. We did a story about elderly people feeling lonely, and one of our schools then off the back of that organised a weekly visit to a care home, which is such a lovely idea. Or even if you write cards or letters, that story had obviously touched those children, and then they were able to take action and feel like they were making a difference in their community, which is wonderful. And there's some other examples there too. But hopefully that might give you some ideas of, if there are issues that your children care about, definitely support those. And it doesn't have to be, a big project. Perhaps it can fall under the responsibility of your school council team. Can they think of or can they collect ideas from the other children of what kind of action they could take to make something better, especially when it's to do with something that they really care about. So just to mention Ofsted briefly, under the personal development section, British values are named in there. So Ofsted are looking for how schools are preparing learners for modern life in Britain. And obviously, all the way through this, we've been talking about how the British values are applicable for life as a grown-up and for living in this country. So if you can be showing how you are really encouraging children to delve into these and understand and live these British values, then that can be really great. And I'll go on to show maybe how you can evidence some of this. But it also, the British values are completely relevant here, in terms of equipping children to be responsible, respectful, active citizens. Lots of what we've talked about links to that, being responsible and making your voice heard and having your say, in terms of mutual respect and tolerance, being active and not standing by and not letting people be treated unfairly, but being that really positive influence on society and hopefully on the world. They name the protected characteristics, so again they're really worth talking about and highlighting to children. So yeah, there's lots and lots on that slide. I won't go into it all. So what are some different ways then that you can really embed British values in school? Someone mentioned before a monthly value, but you could have a weekly British values lesson, or you could have kind of a spotlight on a value each half term or whatever it might be. You might have a themed day. Displays are a really fab way of evidencing what you're doing, and I'll show you some examples a bit later. Pick out British values when you see them being used in books and stories, talking about rules, having visitors in, school council, we've mentioned a lot, learning about our world. If you have any other examples of how you're embedding the children's learning about British values, then please do share it with me. And we've talked about using the news to explore British values. So I'm going to round off soon, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions if there are any. But I've just stolen some school examples. I won't play the video, but this school, they made a video, or they tasked the children with making a video where one British value was left out. I just thought it was a really creative way to really get the children's knowledge of all of those values, and they did an amazing job. And the video's fab, and the link is there, so you'll be able to access it when I send the slides. Use or have children lead assemblies, because it's really empowering for those children leading. It's such a great experience for them to have that position of leadership and to have to plan and prepare and deliver something. Equally, you know, if it's something that they're really passionate about, they get that platform to share their ideas with the rest of the school, and that's amazing. And equally for the children watching that, it's inspiring for them to see their peers talk knowledgeably and passionately about things that they care about. I really feel like pupil-led assemblies are such a win-win situation. If you do these, please feel free to pop any ideas into the chat window. If you or if your school has a social media page, or if you can set one up for maybe your year group or your phase, this is such an amazing way of sharing children's voices far and wide. And you know, especially if you're accessing the news and talking about some of these really current and important topics, it's a great opportunity for you to show that off and show off what your children are saying and the depth of their thinking and reflection. I think that's a really fabulous way of getting all of your amazing work out there. Displays are so wonderful. Again, another real win. These can be managed by the children even. You know, if you've got your school council, perhaps they can be in charge of switching this around. So if you do focus on a weekly news story, or if there is a story that's really sort of captivating the children, get that up there, print an image from it. Have the children do working classes. I think for this display, it's just being held up by magnets. So the school councils switch the picture every week, and they add in a link to the British values and UN rights. And I think the protected characteristics are under there too. And then they collect work from classes that's been completed and add that to display. So it is very much a working display, but it just looks great for, you know, for visitors or for parents who are walking through, but equally for the children, it keeps that story fresh in their mind. And if it's changed regularly, they know it's somewhere they can always go, and there's going to be new ideas or new opinions. This display on the left, these have been scribed obviously by a teacher. So if you are lower down school, maybe in early years or year one or year two, this can be a really nice way of getting children's voices and saying, you know, your opinions are out there for everyone to see and reflect on and think about. Another couple here, I really love this Where in the World display. So every time they learn about a news story, they kind of put a little bit of information about where it's happening in the world. And that's kind of a really exciting idea for children to see this big wide world and see that they're learning about things that are happening all over. And this was an early years display. I really liked that they'd put some picture books that linked to the protected characteristic and the British values for that week. For the teachers could easily pick those up, or equally the children could pick those up and flick through and you know, be inspired to ask questions or talk about what they could see with friends in provision. So we've talked about quite a lot of those. Lots of the evidence and embedding can be really helpful if you are applying for your Rights Respecting School award. Floor books can be a really good alternative to display. So if you don't have the space, you know, up in a corridor or whatever, just get a scrapbook. And again, that can be managed by the children, and it can go in the book corner, and they can go back and revisit. Or perhaps you could have a day of the week where you pick that out and you revisit the story and note, you know, who's written their opinions and what do we think about that, and all of those lovely things. And then this picture is from a school who do this thing called Newsday Tuesday. And so they put a story or a newspaper article, it might be one that they've talked about already, on the lunch tables, and children are really encouraged and supported to, you know, engage with that article and talk about what they think about it and things like that. Okay, so hopefully that's been useful. We do have 5 minutes left, and I will hang around. So if you do have any questions, please do feel free to fire those over. Or if anything comes to you later, please, you know, reach out on email. We're really, really responsive, and things will get over to me. And thank you again so much for your time. Farhat says, questions are relevant and provide a talking point to oracy skills and annual culture day. Ooh, I love that. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you for coming and have a really great evening. Yep, super. No worries, Mel. I'll be sending the slides out. I'll probably do it first thing in the morning once the recording is ready. So I'll send the slides and the recording, no problem. Oh, that's great. No problem. You're all very welcome. Yeah, don't worry, Andy. I'll be sending the slides over. Okay, great. Doesn't look like there's any questions, so I will stop the session there. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.